everyone, and welcome to episode 55 of Off the Sprue. In this one I'll be assembling the tracks on the M1 Abrams from Ryefield model. Just as with the rest of this excellent kit, the M1 Abrams from Ryefield model comes with a set of workable track links, and in this video I'll try and detail these as realistically as possible. The track components consist of quite a few pieces. We've got these lengths of track blocks. We've also got the center guides, a few sprues with those, two different styles. And of course you'll have to make sure that you use the correct style of center guide for the specific version of the M1 that you're building. Finally, we have the track pads, the top and the lower ones, and quite a few sprues of those as well. Finally, RFM supplied this jig that we can use to assemble these. The instructions are quite clear on how to assemble this, quite a process, and giving credit where credit is due, RFM really tried to stick as close as possible to the original track components in the way that they set this up to be assembled. First step, of course, is to get all these components out of the bags. I use a tray system just to keep things orderly and make sure that I don't lose anything. And the first step, of course, is to cut all these tiny little pieces from the sprues. Guys, this is quite an involved process. To be honest, the cleaning up and the cutting took me a full weekend, 3 days, and this is going to take quite a while, so if you're building this kit, make sure that you leave enough time to do this. The smallest part in this assembly are the center guides, and to cut them from the sprues, I used this photo etched scissors from Tamiya just to get into that tight little space there. And with that in my hand, it was easy to just to cut these really small parts from the sprues, and you can see them right there. Now, working with small parts can be a challenge. What I always try to do is to get the part off the sprue and then remove the remaining connector pins and things that would normally be attached to this by hand once I've got the part in my hand, and that's what I'm doing on the screen there. Just removing all the little bits and pieces until finally we are left with the parts themselves. Of course, these will have to be cleaned up. We're not done yet, but the bulk of the cutting from the sprues has now been done, and we can proceed to cleaning up these parts. This, of course, is done with my my Tamiya side cutters as well as a sander. And unfortunately, you will have to do this piece by piece. Again, something that's going to take quite a lot of time. And this was actually the very last one that I finished, and you can see, yes, that sort of tells the story. Now at this point, the parts were covered with dust from the sanding, and I took them to the kitchen sink and just rinsed off all these parts in their trays. And the desk fan that I have at my bench assisted in getting these dry. Now finally, we are at a point where all the tracks have been cleaned up, they've been separated, and assembly can start. Now, a single track link in this case consists of no less than 6 parts. We've got the track pads, the blocks with the end connectors, and finally the center guide. And assembly of this is pretty much true to reality if you look at that diagram there. You will need glue with a very small needle applicator. I like this one from Revel, and you can see there small amounts of glue is needed to get that center guide glued to the track block. And this I did beforehand. I've deviated a little bit from the instructions in this case, but I found that doing this in advance made things a little bit easier. Next are the jigs. I glued them together, also numbered them to make sure that I keep track of the amount of tracks that I was assembling. The process starts with the bottom track pads, and once they are in position on the jig, the track blocks with the attached center guides can be added. They basically fit on top. The fit on this kit is really nice. So whilst this is quite an undertaking, the fit is really good. Once the glue has been added, the last step in the process is just to add these top track pads, and if they are positioned correctly, they just snap into place. So there we go, those are in position. I use the tweezers just to press them down and they click into position, and really that is the process. So 78 per track of these links have to be added in order to help me keep track of things. I actually just wrote the amount down with a marker on the appropriate track link. And again, guys, this was quite a marathon. It took me a full weekend and sort of half a week just to get these 2-track lengths together. But once they're done, we are good to go, and the process can continue to painting and detailing. There we go, 78 track links per side, and those are ready for primer. The primer I'm using in this case is the Panzer Aces primer from Vallejo, track primer. This will need some thinning with Vallejo acrylic thinner. There we go. That is ready to go into the airbrush. This is now sprayed on the top and bottom of each track length, and this will provide the appropriate color as well as the necessary priming for us to continue with this process. Now next I wanted to add the rust that you can see on the end connectors in this reference picture. Doing this is easy. I used again 2 colors from the Panzer Aces range of Vallejo, and also in this case I used the sponge technique. Very easy to do. Pick up some paint with a sponge and just start dabbing this onto the end connectors. Now it's okay if this spills onto the rubber track pads. We'll be fixing that a little bit later. At this stage I'm only concentrating on getting the necessary rust colors down on these tracks. Also remember the center sections, just apply a little bit of rust there, all the metallic exposed surfaces. This is the result. Certainly liking the look of that. All the end connectors have the necessary rust, and at this stage I wanted to break up this, just add a little bit more random color to it, and I used the dark rust color on specific portions, just to break up the light color a little bit. Very little is required. There we go. Rust has been applied. Certainly happy with that, and I can move on to the next step. Now the next phase is to apply the rubber color, and to speed this up I decided to mask off the end connectors as well as the center guides, and there you see the result. It took a while, but certainly worth the effort to speed up the process. I'll need your rubber color on these track pads, and the one I selected is Tire Black from Vallejo Model Air. This is now airbrushed onto the track length. Very easy to do with the appropriate masking applied. On the bottom section I needed to also to mask out the center section there, and again applying some Tire Black. This is the result. It's certainly coming along nicely. You can see the rusted end connectors and the rubber color now applied to the track pads. Some fine touching up might be required just on the edges there. Easy to do with a brush. At this point I applied some track wash from M1A1. Now this really makes a big difference. Of course this is an enamel product, and if appropriately thinned, this will run into all that recessed detail and just really bring out the color contrast. You can see there on your screen the end connectors nicely detailed against the rubber black. This reference picture was my reference for the next step, and I'll be using some deck tan and the dry brush method just to further detail the rubber track pads on this track. There's the result, very close to what we saw in the previous reference picture, and I'm happy with this. Next step is to get the metal shine on these center guides. For that I used polished metal pigment from M1A1. Don't be too concerned about the name polished metal. In this case I just really needed a high shine pigment to get the necessary finish. Used a little piece of paper just to keep that pigment off the rubber track pads, and carefully started polishing up those center guides. Now the tank that I'm building should be in the European theatre of operations in Germany during the late 90s, and for that I'm going to use European earth pigment, again from M1A1. This being a pigment, it's a powder, and I'll be using this in quite a few different ways. The first, I'm going to scoop out some of this with a palette knife onto my Red Grass Games glass palette. I'm going to add some water and get this into a thin, shall we call it mud, or a liquid, just in a form that I can easily brush this onto the tracks. I now work this pigment into all that that recessed detail on that track. The excess is removed with a paper towel, and you can see there immediately a very realistic, dusty, muddy, sort of a dried texture with that pigment in the track, certainly giving us a very realistic effect. Now before I fit the tracks, I will need to apply some weathering to the sides of the hull, because once the tracks are in there I can't reach that spot anymore. I'll be using two products. One is Kursk soil, the other again European earth pigment from M1A1. Before I can go ahead and apply these products, I need to cover the attachment points for the wheels, and for this I'll be using liquid mask from M1A1. Of course this is a latex type product, and this is just to keep the attachment points covered, so I can still get the wheels on afterwards. I now airbrush the Kursk soil onto the sides of the hull. This will give it that dusty look that we're after, and this is also very similar in color to the European earth pigment. In this case I took some of the pigment and I mixed it up with a pigment fixer, also from M1A1. This is now essentially a mud, if you wish, a paste, and if properly mixed, this will be easy to use on the side of the hull. I wanted to use the splatter effect using a stippling brush and my airbrush, and just create all these random splatters of European mud. With this done, I can now remove the dried liquid mask, and it should still be easy to connect the wheels. That is of course the next step, and if you're curious on how I finished and painted these wheels, you can look at episode 48, also on this channel. Now fitting the tracks was actually easier than I thought. Usually this stuff tends to fight you a bit. I've had issues with track bands in the past, but in this case fitting the drive sprockets at the back and adjusting the track links around that was actually quite easy. I did try to film the process, guys, but it was a bit tricky to do that, so please bear with me. Basically what I did was just to pull this tight and add some super glue at strategic places around the wheels, and just keep on adjusting the track length. After a while of fitting and adjusting, I had a length of track on the one side of the tank fitted properly, and I used these self-closing tweezers from Tamiya just to pull that track together and allow the glue to form a good bond. Guys, and there's the result. Of course the wheels themselves will need some more weathering. I'll get to that towards the end of the build, but right now the tracks are on, they're looking good, and I'm certainly happy with this look. We are nearing the end of this build. The next major step will be to get the camouflage scheme on this tank, and that's something I'll be covering in my next video, so do join me for that. This is a list of the colors and the products that I used, available from all good hobby shops. And guys, if you're curious to follow this build and any of my other builds, do join me on Instagram. I post regular updates there, and you're guaranteed not to miss a single thing. Thank you for joining me in this video, and I hope you'll be joining me in the next one coming soon.